I think it's time to discuss your philosophy of drug use as it relates to artistic endeavor.
Hello, lovelies. I knew that my review of Fiasco would set some people off. Again, seems to have been a trend lately, upsetting fans of particular things or kinds of things. Look, just because I don't like something doesn't mean you're not allowed to like something. My taste is my taste. Your views might align with mine, or they might not. But you're going to get an explanation of why I don't like something, and you are free to agree or disagree as you wish. These are matters of opinion. No one's right, no one's wrong. But if anyone was going to be right, it would be me, and if anyone was going to be wrong, it would be you. Now, obviously there's some hyperbole and so on in reviews. You try to make them interesting and so on. Some people seem to have taken objection to the fact that I said Fiasco is not a role-playing game, though they haven't particularly explained their objections very well. And you know, there are other kinds of game out there than role-playing games. Chess is a game that's quite well regarded, so I'm told. Checkers, or some of the more modern games like Carcassonne or Settlers of Catan. You know, people like things that aren't role-playing games, right? But a lot of these story games seem to try to sell themselves as, or describe themselves as, role-playing games, and quite a lot of them aren't. And I feel secure in saying that because they don't involve playing a role. Often they don't necessarily involve playing, but you would need all three factors to be a role-playing game, and often they're not games. When you adopt a role in a game, you are playing a character. You are experiencing the fictional game world through the lens of that character, and you are inhabiting them. You are in their skin. Ideally, you reach some sort of level of immersion where you're reacting and thinking to a degree as the character, right? And a lot of these story games, you don't do that at all, really. You might have a character, but the game takes place at a meta level, not one where you're inhabiting the character, but rather one where, often in negotiation with the other players around the table, you are just putting the character into situations. You are a writer who is creating situations for those characters. You're not inhabiting them, you are directing them. You are providing notes, that sort of thing. So that's not adopting a role. Well, it might be adopting the role of a writer or something, but a lot of these story games end up being collaborative writing exercises, not role-playing games. If I am writing a novel about a thick-hued barbarian going about doing this, that, and the other, I am not inhabiting that role. I am writing that character and what happens to that character, but I am not inhabiting the role. There is a distinct difference. There is a dividing line between the two. A lot of times, story games have obtuse mechanics that require constant negotiation and argument with the other players or the games master, if there is one at all, and that feels a lot more like work. And being a writer in a writer's room feels a lot more like work to me. Maybe that's just me, because I'm also an author as well as a game designer. I don't know, but it takes it out of being play for me, and the fact that I have to deal with all these other people around the table also wanting to generously, let's say, contribute to the story I'm trying to craft. Yeah, that makes it feel like work. It doesn't make it feel like play. And are they games? Games tend to have stakes, risk, win and loss conditions, and rules for determining who loses and who wins. And quite often, story games don't have that. If we look to Fiasco, for example, it doesn't have a fail state. It doesn't have risk. It doesn't have winners and losers. There are no stakes. There is no urgency. There is no cunning way to play the game in order to win, because there is no win condition. And so it is not a game in any meaningful sense of the word. Of course, there are games where you cooperate against either mechanics, as you might in Arkham, or against the Games Master, even if you're not actually against the Games Master. But that's cooperating, but it's still against something, and it's still possible to lose. So this is the problem for me. This is why most story games don't give me what I'm after. They almost entirely get rid of the game aspect, because they are writing exercises they feel like work, not play, and there is no role to it. You might have a character sheet, you might have a character that you have more responsibility for, but you're not inhabiting that character. This seems to be the hard thing to get across to people, which makes me wonder how some people are playing, full-on role-playing games. But to be a role-playing game, you have to hit all three marks, and for me, a lot of story games don't hit any of them, or only hit one of them, and that's not sufficient for it to be a role-playing game. But that's fine. There are other kinds of game. Basically, they just don't scratch the itch that I am looking to have scratched, and the kind of thing that they're designed to scratch is something that I can get scratched better by either games mastering or writing a story, just out and out writing a story. Part of the reason that they don't do much for me, a lot of them, I do like more narrative-led games, but that's a different thing. But it is because the whole reason we have rule structures in RPGs is so that we have a more mature and adult way of playing make-believe that doesn't just devolve into arguments. Bang, you're dead. No, I have a force field. Ad infinitum, and so on. And without that moderating influence, that neutral third party in the form of the Games Master or the rules to appeal to, there is no way to get past entrenched disagreements, and they're more likely to get out of hand. It's going back to those bad old days of pointless arguments that friends would have playing War in the Yard, So ultimately, while I enjoy some more narrative-led games, explicit story games, especially GM-less ones, they just don't scratch an itch of mine that needs scratching. I write stories as well as games. I can get that itch scratched elsewhere, and much better than most of these games can do. They just seem pretentious and ill thought out. This is many of the same reasons I'm not sold on solo gaming. Why not just write a fucking story? And live play after live play after live play, trying to understand the appeal, particularly of Fiasco, but of Apocalypse World 2, nobody seems to really be having fun. The smiles seem strained, the constant wrangling and negotiation, and it's so tiresome looking. So it's not for me, but if it's for you, that's fine. But don't ascribe motives or positions to me that I'm not holding. I will happily explain to you at length why I don't like something. Zang.
Daikaiju Dai is a game about beating up monsters in giant mecha. The players take the part of mecha pilots and their support crew, using the fate system to allow the one to influence the other. They will fight giant monsters and walk in their shadow. They will establish rivalries and defeat villains. They will uncover conspiracies and lead the fight back against what seems to be a world itself in rebellion against humanity. Mostly, though, they'll smash giant monsters to pieces in epic, destructive fights. Available from post-mort.com, lulu.com, and drive-thru RPG.